My boyfriend's mother called me temporary, then tried to destroy my career. She didn't realize I had the evidence, and I was about to expose her deepest betrayal to her own son. The scent of rosemary and garlic, a fragrance I had personally nurtured for 6 hours, hung heavy in the opulent dining room. It was supposed to be the smell of acceptance, of a bridge finally being built. The mahogany table gleamed under the soft light of the crystal chandelier, each piece of silverware polished to a mirror shine, each wine glass singing a tiny, perfect note when tapped. At the center of it all, my masterpiece, a slow-roasted leg of lamb, its skin a perfect crackling brown, nestled on a bed of roasted potatoes and carrots that I had peeled and chopped until my knuckles were sore. It was a feast fit for royalty, or at least for the family of the man I loved. My boyfriend, Mark, sat to my right, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering in my chest. He beamed, raising his glass. "To my amazing girlfriend," he said, his voice warm and proud, "for cooking the best meal this house has ever seen. Mom, you've got competition." His mother, Eleanor, who sat opposite me like a queen surveying her court, offered a smile that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. "It's lovely, dear," she said, her voice dripping with honeyed condescension. "It's always so nice to see a young woman with a hobby. A hobby. 6 hours of planning, shopping, and painstaking labor reduced to a hobby." I felt the familiar prickle of irritation, the one that always appeared whenever Eleanor was in the room. For 3 years, I had been trying to win her over. 3 years of enduring passive-aggressive comments about my job, my apartment, my clothes, and my apparent inability to live up to the invisible, perfect standard she held for her son's partner. Mark, bless his heart, was usually oblivious, mistaking his mother's barbs for quirky compliments. His father, Richard, a man of few words and a perpetually neutral expression, simply grunted in agreement and took a large bite of lamb. He was the easy one. It was Eleanor, who was the gatekeeper to this family, and that gate was firmly shut. "So," Eleanor began, delicately dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, "Richard and I were discussing the family cruise for next summer. We're thinking the Greek Isles this time. Mark, you'll have to make sure your schedule is clear for the last 2 weeks of July." Mark's face lit up. "The Greek Isles? That sounds incredible, Mom." "Yes, it will be," she continued, her gaze sweeping over Mark, then Richard, then their daughter Chloe, who was busy texting under the table. Her eyes flicked to me for a fraction of a second before dismissing me entirely. "Just the 4 of us. It's been too long since we've had a proper family trip." The silence that followed was deafening. Just the 4 of them. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been with Mark for 3 years. We lived together. We were talking about a future, about marriage. But in his mother's eyes, I was still just a placeholder. Mark seemed to finally catch on. He cleared his throat, a nervous blush creeping up his neck. "Mom," he said, his voice a little tight, "we're a package deal, you know that." Eleanor let out a light, tinkling laugh that sounded like shattering glass. She placed her hand on Mark's arm, her perfectly manicured red nails a stark contrast to his skin. "Oh, darling, don't be silly. It's a family thing. Besides," she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was intentionally loud enough for me to hear perfectly, "we can't make such permanent, expensive plans around, well, temporary arrangements." Temporary. The word hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a word, it was a verdict. It was the summation of every dismissive glance, every backhanded compliment, every time she'd introduced me as Mark's friend. All my effort, all my love, all my patience. It was all temporary. I looked down at the plate in front of me, at the food I had so lovingly prepared. The rich aroma of the lamb now smelled sickeningly sweet. Mark was flustered. "Mom, that's not what I meant. That's a horrible thing to say." "I'm just being practical, dear," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's a big expense. We have to be realistic." I didn't say a word. I just stared at the table. This beautiful, perfect table laden with food made with my own 2 hands, a contribution to a family that considered me a temporary arrangement. A wave of ice-cold clarity washed over me. The hurt was still there, a sharp stone in my gut, but it was being rapidly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I'd been playing a game for 3 years, a game with rules I could never win because the referee was also my opponent, and I was done playing. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my knife and fork down on my plate. The gentle clink of metal on porcelain seemed to echo in the tense silence. Everyone's eyes snapped to me. Mark looked worried, Chloe looked up from her phone with mild interest, and Eleanor watched me with a look of faint, triumphant curiosity, as if she was waiting for the tears, for the dramatic exit. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished hardwood floor, and stood up. I looked directly at Eleanor, my expression as calm and neutral as I could make it. Her smug little smile faltered for a second. "You're right, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady and clear. It didn't waver. It didn't crack. "You have to be practical." I reached out not for my own plate, but for the large, heavy platter in the center of the table, the one holding my masterpiece, the leg of lamb. I lifted it carefully. It was still warm. I held her gaze and said the words that had just formed, perfect and sharp in my mind. If I'm only temporary here, then my food is temporary too. And with the entire family watching in stunned, open-mouthed silence, I started clearing the table. I didn't take the plates they were eating from. I took the source. I turned with the heavy platter in my hands and began walking towards the kitchen, the scent of rosemary and garlic following me like a ghost. Their dinner, my supposed offering of peace and love, was officially over. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, a mixture of shock, confusion, and for the first time, from Eleanor, a flicker of genuine alarm. The heavy swing door to the kitchen closed behind me with a soft whoosh, cutting off the shocked silence of the dining room. For a moment, it was just me and the lamb. I placed the heavy ceramic platter on the gleaming stainless steel island. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel like screaming or crying. I felt a profound, almost serene sense of purpose. I'd been treading water for 3 years, and I had just decided to stop kicking and simply walk out of the ocean. I opened a wide drawer, the one I had organized for them just last month, and pulled out the stack of large glass food containers I'd bought myself. They were having a dinner party, and their mismatched, lidless Tupperware was a disaster. I'd spent $50 on a new set, a temporary contribution, I now realized. With a steady hand, I began carving the lamb, slicing the tender meat away from the bone and arranging it neatly in the largest container. The juices, rich and fragrant, pooled at the bottom. The door swung open again. It was Mark, of course. His face was a mess of confusion and panic. "Babe, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You can't just take the food." "I can," I said without looking up from my task. I moved on to the roasted potatoes, scooping their crispy, herb-flecked perfection into another container. I bought it. I cooked it. It's mine. And since I am a temporary arrangement, I'll be taking my temporary property with me when I go. "She didn't mean it like that," he stammered, running a hand through his hair. It was his go-to defense for his mother, the flimsy shield he always used. "You know how she is. She doesn't think before she speaks." "Oh, I think she thinks, Mark," I replied, snapping a lid onto the potatoes with a satisfying click. "She thinks very carefully. Every word is a calculated little test, a little push to see if I'll finally fall over. I'm just tired of the test." I walked past him, back into the dining room. The 3 of them were sitting exactly as I had left them, frozen like figures in a wax museum. Richard was staring at his empty plate. Chloe was looking up from her phone, her eyes wide with what looked like actual, unadulterated entertainment. And Eleanor. Her face was a mask of thunderous fury. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her wine glass. I ignored them all. I went straight for the side dishes. the honey-glazed carrots and parsnips, the creamy gratin I had spent half the morning thinly slicing potatoes for, the rich dark gravy made from the pan drippings, which I had proudly told Eleanor was my secret recipe. I picked up the serving bowls one by one and carried them back into the kitchen. Each trip was a silent, deliberate statement. I am removing myself. I am removing my care. I am removing my effort. "This is insane," Mark whispered frantically, following me back and forth like a lost puppy. "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, stopping in the kitchen doorway to look him in the eye. "What's embarrassing is you letting your mother call the woman you claim to love a temporary arrangement at her own dinner table. What's embarrassing is that you were apparently going to let me find out I wasn't invited on a 2-week cruise with the family I've been trying to be a part of for 3 years. Before he could answer, Eleanor appeared behind him. Her posture was ramrod straight, her eyes blazing. "That is quite enough," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but you will put that food back on my table this instant. You are a guest in this house." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Am I a guest, Eleanor, or am I a temporary arrangement? You need to pick one. Guests are treated with respect. Temporary arrangements are, by definition, disposable." I turned my back on her and went to the refrigerator. I pulled out the dessert, a chocolate lava cake made from scratch with a raspberry coulis I'd prepared yesterday. It was Mark's favorite. I set the entire tray on the counter, ready to be packed up with the rest. That seemed to be the final straw for her. "You ungrateful little girl," she spat, her voice finally rising. "After everything we've done for you, letting you into our family—" "Letting me in?" I spun around, my own voice rising to meet hers, the dam of my composure finally cracking. "You've never let me in. You've held me at arm's length since day one. You've criticized my job, insulted my apartment, and made it painfully clear that I will never, ever be good enough for your son. I cooked this meal, this entire feast, as another pathetic attempt to get you to see me as a person. But you can't. You only see me as a placeholder until someone you approve of comes along." I gestured to the containers of food, now neatly packed into 2 large reusable shopping bags on the floor. "Well, this placeholder is clocking out, and I'm taking my pension with me." Mark stood between us, his head turning back and forth as if he were watching a tennis match. "Mom, please. Babe, please. Let's just all calm down." I zipped up the bags. I looked past Eleanor's furious face, past Mark's pleading eyes, and said calmly, "I'm leaving, Mark." "Don't be ridiculous. You're not going anywhere," Eleanor scoffed. "You're just being dramatic." I picked up the heavy bags. I walked towards the hallway that led to the front door. Mark moved to block my path, his hands held up in a placating gesture. "Just wait," he begged. "We can fix this. I'll talk to her. We'll sort it out." I stopped right in front of him, so close I could see the panic swirling in his eyes. I looked at the man I loved, the man who I thought loved me, the man who had just sat there and let his mother detonate our relationship. My heart ached, but my resolve didn't break. "There's nothing to sort out," I said, my voice suddenly quiet. "She told the truth. In your family's grand plan, I'm temporary, and you never corrected her. You never bought me a ticket to Greece, did you?" He had the decency to look away, shame-faced. That was all the answer I needed. I shifted the weight of the bags in my hands. I made enough food tonight for 10 people. It was supposed to be for our new blended family, but it turns out I'm not family. I took a deep breath. "My friend Sarah just had a baby. Her husband is working 2 jobs. I don't think they've had a decent home-cooked meal in weeks. I'm going to take this food to them, to a family that will actually appreciate it." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a chilling finality. "So you have a choice to make right now, Mark. You can stay here in this beautiful house with your permanent family and your empty table, or you can get your coat and come with me." The question hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile as a soap bubble. Come with me, or stay. The choice was simple, binary, yet I could see a war raging behind Mark's eyes. He looked from my face, resolute and waiting, to his mother, who was now standing with her arms crossed, an expression of pure, unadulterated fury etched onto her features. She looked like a queen whose favorite courtier had just defected. His father and sister were now standing in the dining room doorway, silent spectators to the implosion of our relationship. "Mark," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a low, warning tone, "don't you dare." It wasn't a plea. It was a command, the matriarch pulling the leash on her son. I saw his shoulders slump, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but it told me everything. He was choosing. He was choosing comfort, familiarity, the path of least resistance. He was choosing her. "Babe, just put the food down," he pleaded, his voice weak. "We can talk about this tomorrow. Don't do this." "There is no tomorrow, Mark," I said softly, the ache in my heart solidifying into something hard and protective. "You just made that clear." I didn't wait for another word. I turned my back on him, on all of them, and walked down the hallway. Each step felt both impossibly heavy and liberatingly light. The weight of the bags in my hands was nothing compared to the weight of the expectations I was finally setting down. I could hear Eleanor's triumphant scoff behind me, a sound that would be seared into my memory. I reached the front door, pulled it open, and stepped out into the cool night air. The click of the door closing behind me was the most definitive sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a chapter ending. I walked to my car, parked on their ridiculously long cobblestone driveway, and placed the bags of food carefully on the passenger seat. The aroma of rosemary and garlic filled the small space, a cruel reminder of the hopes I'd had just an hour ago. As I sat in the driver's seat, the tears I had held back finally came. They weren't hysterical, sobbing tears, but silent, hot tears that tracked down my cheeks. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of a future I had so carefully constructed in my mind. The house we'd talked about buying, the dog we were going to adopt, the children's names we'd playfully argued over. It all dissolved into the rearview mirror as I pulled away from the big, brightly lit house. I drove on autopilot, my mind a blur. I didn't even think about where I was going until I found myself pulling up outside my friend Sarah's small apartment building. The lights were on in her second-floor window. Suddenly, I felt a pang of doubt. Was this crazy? Was I just being overly dramatic? Should I have just swallowed the insult, eaten the lamb, and tried to smooth things over later? Then I pictured Eleanor's smug face, the way she'd called me a temporary arrangement like she was talking about a rental car. And I remembered Mark's silence, his inability to stand up for me, for us. No, this wasn't drama. This was self-preservation. I grabbed the bags and headed upstairs. When Sarah opened the door, she looked exhausted. Her hair was in a messy bun, there were dark circles under her eyes, and a tiny sleeping baby was snuggled against her chest in a carrier. "Hey," she said, her voice a tired whisper. "What's up? Is everything okay?" My composure crumbled again. "Mark and I broke up," I blurted out, the words tasting like ash. Her eyes widened in shock. "What? Oh my God, come in!" She ushered me inside, her concern overriding her exhaustion. "What happened?" I put the bags on her small kitchen counter. His mother happened. Again. But this time was the last time. I opened the containers, revealing the feast inside. The rich smell filled her small kitchen. Sarah's jaw dropped. "Did you rob a catering company?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "Sort of," I said, managing a weak smile back. "I cooked this for them, and then I uncooked it for them. It's a long story, but I figured you and David could use a good meal." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You have no idea," she whispered, looking at the food like it was a pile of gold. "David's working a double tonight. I was about to have a bowl of cereal for dinner." We sat at her small kitchen table while I recounted the entire humiliating saga. She listened intently, her expression shifting from outrage to sympathy. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Good for you," she said fiercely. "You did the right thing. You deserve someone who will make you his permanent family, not his temporary girlfriend." Her words were a balm on my raw nerves. We ate the lamb and potatoes right out of the containers, talking for hours. It felt good to be with a friend, to be in a home, no matter how small, that was filled with genuine warmth and not the cold, performative politeness of Mark's house. I crashed on her sofa, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of my phone vibrating relentlessly on the end table. I had over 20 missed calls and a barrage of texts, all from Mark. "Babe, please answer. I'm so sorry. I messed up. My mom was out of line. I should have said something. Please just come home so we can talk. I love you. Don't throw this away." I stared at the messages, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The word home stung. The apartment we shared was no longer my home. It was just a place filled with his things and my memories. I texted back a single sentence. "I'll be by this afternoon to get my stuff." His reply was instantaneous. "I'll be there. We need to talk." I knew it would be hard, but it had to be done. Sarah helped me pack a few boxes from her place, things I'd left over the years. When I pulled up to our apartment building that afternoon, my heart was pounding. Mark's car was in its usual spot. I took a deep breath, grabbed an empty box, and headed inside, preparing myself for the most difficult conversation of my life. I had my speech rehearsed, my reasons listed, my resolve hardened. But when I opened the door to our apartment, I stopped dead in my tracks. Everything I had prepared to say vanished from my mind, replaced by a single overwhelming feeling of dread. It wasn't Mark who was standing there waiting for me. It was Eleanor. Eleanor stood in the middle of our living room like she owned it. She was dressed in a chic, expensive-looking cream pantsuit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, a designer handbag dangling from her arm. She surveyed the apartment, my home, with a subtle look of distaste, her eyes lingering on the slightly worn armchair I loved, the colorful abstract painting I'd bought at a street fair. I felt a surge of defensive anger. This was my space, the one place I didn't have to deal with her judgment. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. I held the empty cardboard box like a shield. She offered a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Mark is very upset," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "He told me you were coming to collect your things. I thought it would be best if I were here to mediate." "Mediate?" I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You're the one who threw the grenade. You don't get to play peacemaker now." "There's no need for such melodrama," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "You overreacted. I made a simple, practical statement, and you created an embarrassing scene. You humiliated my son." "I'm glad he has you to defend his honor," I said, walking past her towards the bedroom. "Where is he, anyway? Did you ground him?" "He's out running some errands. For me," she added with a pointed look. "He understands the importance of family obligations." The implication was clear. I didn't. I ignored her and started opening drawers in the bedroom, pulling out my clothes and piling them onto the bed. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to remain steady. I would not let her see how much this was affecting me. Eleanor followed me, leaning against the doorframe, a silent, scrutinizing presence. "You know," she began, her voice taking on a deceptively reasonable tone, "this is really for the best. You and Mark are simply not compatible." "Because I won't let you walk all over me?" I shot back, not looking at her. "Because you're not from our world, dear," she said, the condescension dripping from every syllable. "You have your own little life, your little job. It's sweet, but Mark has a legacy to uphold, a family name. He needs a partner who understands that, someone who can manage a household, host fundraisers, sit on charity boards, someone with the right background." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face her. And I don't have the right background? Because my parents are retired teachers and not corporate lawyers? Because I had to work my way through college instead of having it paid for by a trust fund? Don't be so defensive, she chided. I'm just saying, you're not equipped for the life that's expected of Mark's wife. You're a lovely girl in your own way, but you're a chapter in his life, not the whole book. I've always known that. I was just trying to spare you further hurt by being honest. Her twisted logic was staggering. She wasn't apologizing. She was positioning herself as the hero of the story, the wise matriarch saving me from my own inadequacies. The sheer, unmitigated arrogance of it took my breath away. So you've been actively trying to break us up for 3 years? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She gave a delicate shrug. I've been trying to help my son see reality. He's always had a soft heart, a weakness for lost causes. Lost cause. That's what I was to her. Not a person, not the woman her son loved, but a project, a charity case. I felt the last vestiges of my composure crumble, not into tears, but into a cold, diamond-hard fury. I walked out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, a place filled with so many happy memories. Us cooking together, laughing, dancing to music on the radio. Her presence here felt like a violation. I opened the pantry. On the top shelf behind the cereal was the expensive bottle of 25-year-old single malt scotch, a gift from Richard to Mark last Christmas. Eleanor had made a big show of it, talking about its rarity and price. I grabbed the bottle. "What are you doing?" she asked, a flicker of alarm in her eyes. "You said I was a chapter in his life," I said, unscrewing the cap. "Well, chapters have endings, and I think this one deserves a memorable finale." I walked over to the sink and, holding her gaze, I tipped the bottle and began to pour the amber liquid down the drain. A river of gold smelling of peat and oak and an obscene amount of money gurgled away. Eleanor gasped, her mask of cool composure finally shattering. "Stop that! Are you insane? Do you know how much that costs?" She rushed towards me, her hands outstretched as if to grab the bottle. I held it just out of her reach, continuing to pour. "It's just a temporary arrangement, Eleanor, like me, easily disposed of." When the bottle was empty, I placed it gently on the counter. Her face was pale with shock and rage. "You will regret this," she seethed. "I will make sure Mark knows what a childish, vindictive person you truly are." "He already knows who I am," I said, turning to face her fully. "The real question is whether he knows who you are." Just then, we heard a key in the lock. The front door opened and Mark walked in, carrying a paper bag of groceries. He stopped dead, his eyes darting between my stony face and his mother's furious one. The empty scotch bottle sat on the counter between us like a smoking gun. What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with dread. Eleanor recovered first. She composed her features into a mask of wounded sadness. "Mark, darling," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I came here to try and reason with her, to fix things, and she became hysterical. She's been destroying your property." She pointed a shaking finger at the empty bottle. Mark looked at the bottle, then at me. His expression was a mixture of confusion and dawning disappointment. He was buying it. He was actually buying her act. I didn't say a word. I just watched him, waiting. This was it. The final test. Who would he believe? The woman he'd loved for 3 years, or the mother who had manipulated him his entire life? "She poured out Dad's scotch?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper directed at his mother, but his eyes were locked on me, full of accusation. "All of it," Eleanor said, pressing a hand to her chest. She was unhinged. I saw the trust in his eyes flicker and die. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a volatile, unpredictable stranger who had just proven his mother right. He took a step towards her, a protective, instinctual movement. He had chosen, again. A strange sense of calm settled over me. It was over, truly over. Fine, I said, my voice flat. Believe her. I walked back into the bedroom to get my box of clothes. I could hear them whispering in the living room, his mother's soothing tones, his own confused murmurs. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to be gone. I hoisted the box, which was now heavy with my belongings, and walked back out. Eleanor was now standing beside Mark, her hand on his arm, a picture of maternal comfort. As I walked toward the door, she gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smile of pure triumph. She had won. She had gotten what she wanted. Her son was hers again, untainted by the temporary girl from the wrong side of the tracks. I paused at the door, turning back to look at them one last time. "You know, Eleanor," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet apartment, "you call me temporary. You call me a lost cause. But I'm walking out of here with my integrity. I wonder what you'll have left when he finally sees you for who you really are." She scoffed, but I saw a flash of uncertainty in Mark's eyes, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. It wasn't much, but it was something. As I was about to walk out the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but on a whim, I pulled it out. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was a single image, a screenshot of a conversation. My blood ran cold as I read the words. It was a text exchange between Eleanor and an unknown person. "Eleanor, is everything in place for Monday? We need this to go smoothly. He can't know I was involved." Unknown. All set. The internal investigation will be anonymous. By the time they're done, her professional reputation will be in tatters. She won't get a job in this city again. My box slipped from my grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. This wasn't just about breaking us up. This was about destroying me. My breath caught in my throat. The text message on my screen glowed with a malevolence that made the argument about the scotch feel like a childish spat. This wasn't just a mother trying to protect her son. This was a calculated, vicious attack on my livelihood. The company I worked for had a notoriously strict code of conduct. An anonymous internal investigation could be a career-ending event, a black mark that would follow me for years, regardless of the outcome. Eleanor wasn't just trying to get me out of Mark's life. She was trying to erase me from the city. I looked up from my phone, my shock morphing into a white-hot, clarifying rage. Mark was still looking at me with that wounded, disappointed expression. His mother stood beside him, a serene, victorious smirk playing on her lips. They had no idea what I was holding in my hand. "What is it now?" Eleanor asked, her voice dripping with bored irritation. "Did one of your little friends send you a sad emoji?" I didn't answer her. I walked slowly towards Mark, my phone held out in front of me. "Mark," I said, my voice eerily calm, "you need to see this." He hesitated, glancing at his mother. She gave a slight shake of her head, a silent command for him to ignore me. For a moment, I thought he would obey, but a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps a lingering sliver of loyalty to the woman he'd spent 3 years with, won out. He took the phone from my hand. I watched his face as he read the screenshot. His brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. He read it again, his thumb scrolling back and forth as if he couldn't process the words. The color drained from his face. He looked up, not at me, but at his mother. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "What is this? This has to be a joke, right?" Eleanor's composure finally, catastrophically, broke. A flicker of pure panic crossed her features before she masked it with indignation. "It's obviously fake," she snapped, reaching for the phone. "She's desperate. She's probably been sitting in her car for an hour creating this fabrication to try and win you back." But her denial was too quick, too shrill. I saw the doubt solidify into horrified certainty in Mark's eyes. He knew his mother. He knew her capabilities, her ruthlessness. He pulled the phone back, protecting it from her grasp. "Who sent this to you?" he asked me, his eyes pleading, searching for some other explanation. "I don't know," I said honestly. "The number is blocked. Maybe it's someone you've both underestimated, someone with a conscience. I suspected it might be his sister Chloe, who had always been a silent, resentful observer of her mother's manipulations. Or perhaps even his father, a man who rarely spoke but saw everything. It didn't matter. The truth was out. Mark looked at his mother, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time in his life without the filter of filial devotion. He saw not a protective parent, but a saboteur. "You were going to ruin her career?" he asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "Because you didn't like her? Because she poured out a bottle of scotch?" "Don't be naive, Mark," Eleanor spat, abandoning all pretense of innocence. "This has nothing to do with the scotch. This is about your future. She is a distraction, a dead end. I did what was necessary to protect you, to protect our family's legacy." "Protect me?" he roared, a sound of raw anguish I had never heard from him before. "By trying to destroy an innocent person? The person I love? What kind of protection is that? This isn't love, Mom. It's poison, it's control." He turned to me, his face a canvas of regret. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been such a fool. I've let her do this. I've let her say these things. I've been weak. I should have stood up for you from the very beginning. I should have been on that cruise with you, not them." The apology was everything I had wanted to hear for 3 years, but hearing it now, in the wreckage of our relationship, it felt too late. The damage was done. The trust was irrevocably broken, not just by her actions, but by his inaction. "Yes, Mark," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You should have." I took my phone back from his hand. I looked at Eleanor, whose face was a mask of cold fury. She had lost. Her ultimate power play had backfired spectacularly, and in her son's eyes she was no longer a queen, but a tyrant. "I won't be needing to pack the rest of my things right now," I said, my gaze sweeping over both of them. I gestured to the screenshot on my phone. "I think I have a more pressing matter to attend to, a potential issue at work that I need to get ahead of. I have to go speak with my boss, and maybe a lawyer." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but potent. Eleanor's face went white. An internal investigation she instigated was one thing. A formal harassment complaint from me, armed with evidence against the wife of a prominent businessman, was another thing entirely. It would be messy. It would be public. It would tarnish the precious family name she was so desperate to protect. Mark stepped towards me, his hand reaching out. "Wait," he pleaded. "Let me fix this. I can fix this. We can fix this." I looked at his outstretched hand and then at his face. I saw the love there, but I also saw the years of weakness, the pattern of capitulation that would likely never change. He might stand up to her today, but what about tomorrow? What about the next time she disapproved of something? I would be fighting this battle for the rest of my life. I took a step back, out of his reach. "There is no we anymore, Mark," I said, the finality of the words settling in my own heart. "You need to fix your relationship with your mother. I need to go live a life where I don't have to constantly fight for my own worth." I bent down, picked up my fallen box of clothes, and walked out the door without looking back. I didn't run. I walked. I walked away from the drama, the toxicity, the conditional love. The next day, I preemptively met with my boss, explained the situation with a calm professionalism I didn't know I possessed, and showed him the message. He was appalled and assured me of the company's full support. The anonymous tip never materialized. My career was safe. Mark called and texted for weeks. He told me he had moved out of his mother's house, that he'd given her an ultimatum, that he was in therapy. He begged for another chance. I never responded. My healing required a clean break. A few months later, I was having dinner at Sarah and David's. Their baby was cooing in his high chair, and the apartment was filled with the delicious aroma of a lasagna I'd brought over. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Chloe. It was a photo of the family's Greek cruise. Richard was staring out at the ocean, looking bored. Eleanor was sitting alone, looking miserable. and the two chairs beside them, Mark's and the one that should have been mine, were conspicuously empty. I smiled, took a bite of my lasagna, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly permanently at home.